It's the story that's dominated the Premier League and really world football over the last 72 hours. On Thursday, Chelsea's longtime Russian owner Roman Abramovich was sanctioned by the UK government due to what it calls his, quote, close relationship with Russia's president, Vladimir Putin. The government froze Abramovich's assets. This coming after there were calls for him to face sanctions since the beginning of the ongoing war in Ukraine. And as you might imagine, the sanctions have had a massive impact on Chelsea. Among the implications, the club cannot buy or sell players, offer new contracts, or sell new tickets or merchandise. However, the government did publish a license which authorized a number of football-related activities to continue. That includes playing games. We saw Chelsea win at Norwich on Thursday. They can also continue to pay players and staff. Existing ticket holders can still attend games, and they're allowed to spend just over $26,000 per match for travel to and from away games. Following this story throughout has been our Premier League insider, David Ornstein. David, can you bring us up to date with the latest developments?
Paul, there has been a huge amount of conversation over this massive story, but I think one thing we need to make clear to our audiences and people watching all over the world is that this really is a terribly serious crisis for Chelsea. It's an existential threat, if we're to be honest, because if it doesn't get resolved imminently, Chelsea will essentially run out of money because Roman Abramovich's asset, has been frozen. And the restrictions that have been placed upon them, some of which you mentioned there, are onerous. They're extremely tight, and they are crippling Chelsea Football Club. Now, the government has amended that license that you mentioned to allow a little bit more money to come through. They're allowed to spend more on match days, for example. And negotiations continue to potentially, if Chelsea get their way, allow signings, allow sales in the summer transfer window beyond this license, which expires on the 31st of May, to renew contracts, because otherwise they could be going into next season without a defence, essentially, because they've got three players, Cesar Azpilicueta, Antonio Rudiger and Andreas Christensen, out of contract. And so they want some element of flexibility. I think from their perspective, they're saying, why don't you let us do a bit more of this? Why don't you let us sell tickets for matches to bring some revenues in to allow us to continue operating? This money is not going to go to Roman Abramovich. It's not going to fund the war that Russia are waging in Ukraine. But the government, and this is underlined by their actions, clearly think that is a realistic threat because they're not holding up. They are not letting go of that stranglehold they've got over Chelsea for now. Let's see what the coming days bring when those talks continue. And one thing we need to make clear is this really is now all about the sale. And the sale is not clear. There are a lot of grey areas. Essentially, the government of Great Britain are getting into uncharted territory. They have not seized Chelsea. They have frozen the assets of Roman Abramovich. Chelsea is still his. And therefore, although he has given the green light for the sale process to proceed, he is technically still involved in this, with Rainbank of New York overseeing the process. And I think their priority will be to find the right buyer and then to recommend them to the British government, who will then have to issue a new license that will allow the sale to go through if they think it is the right one for Chelsea. But they can't just strip this at this moment in time from Roman Abramovich. And therefore, technically, he could say, well, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to see if these restrictions and sanctions get lifted on me, and then it's still mine. I still want to say in this process. All the messages coming out from his camp are that he is going to cooperate with this, and he does want the best interests of Chelsea served. And I think perhaps the government are really putting the squeeze on him and testing that and saying, well, in an ideal world then, if you really care about Chelsea Football Club, hand it over for nothing. And let us get on with the sale process and decide where it goes to. But that's the big question at the moment. There's been a lot of talk about where exactly that money will go. Well, as things stand, if Chelsea are sold, that money, we assume, will be frozen like everything else coming into the club. And then how can it be used? Well, I think the government would look to bring a buyer in and say to that buyer, you can inject money in, you can have the restrictions lifted, and Chelsea can get back to an element of normality. But what happens with the sale proceeds that we have mentioned before? Well, the message coming out from various quarters, the government, even the government of Ukraine, is that these proceeds should go to war victims, maybe the Disasters Emergency Fund. Roman Abramovich has pledged the proceeds, the net proceeds, to go to victims of the war. He didn't specify which victims, but how long will he have a say in this matter? How long will it all go on? And the longer it goes on, guys, Chelsea don't have sources of income. They cannot sell match day programs. They've lost some of their sponsors, like the front of shirt sponsor, 3 Telecommunications. Hyundai have also walked away. There have been questions about Nike, but we think that they're going to stand firm for the time being. Now, payday for the players is the 1st of April. Let's see if they get to that point in the current condition and if they are able to pay their players. We think they will be, because the government has allowed some of the television revenues and the European Champions League prize money to be paid to Chelsea. But this is a deeply concerning issue by the minute, by the hour, by the day. There are people at Chelsea who don't know what is going on, and these are high-powered people who are responsible for decision-making on a day-to-day basis. The travel budget restriction of £20,000 for away matches has not been changed as things stand. Now, there's a feeling that if they get through in the Champions League past Lille, a trip that has already been paid for, then they will struggle to pay for the next round if the restrictions are not eased. How will they get to Middlesbrough next weekend in the FA Cup? Because normally you would fly there, and that would cost more than £20,000. Will the players be dipping into their own pockets? What does the future hold for those players and their contracts? Will Chelsea be deemed in breach of them? Will they see some of those players free to walk away? Will Thomas Tuchel remain as manager? I'm told that he wants to remain, and if this sorts itself out, he will remain. But if it's not sorted out, what will happen with him? Now, I've got to say to you that for many years there were people watching Chelsea under the ownership of Roman Abramovich, and for all they were winning and progressing and all the good things that he was doing for that club, they were saying, what if the rug is taken from beneath the feet of Chelsea by Roman Abramovich? Then the house of cards will fall down. But then you would turn to people inside the club who said that will never happen. He's committed to this club. He will always stick around. But it's come full circle. And now the rug has been taken from beneath Roman Abramovich's feet by the UK government, and it leaves Chelsea in this doomsday scenario that must be sorted with immediate effect. I can't stress that enough for their financial future. Now, one of the potential buyers, Nick Candy, has released a statement saying he will be at the match today at Stamford Bridge, and that he is prepared to admit a fan representative to the board if he is to take over, that he's prepared to put funds up to help them through this current crisis. All well and good saying that in public, but people we speak to say he's an unlikely buyer. It's going to take much more wealth. And that's why you're seeing US investors coming to the fore, part of consortiums. Even Saudis have been mentioned, Turkish as well. There are no shortage of interested parties in Chelsea, but they need to put their best foot forward now. They need to get this deal done with the British government, with Rainbank and with Roman Abramovich, because his era is coming to an end. But is Chelsea's existence coming to an end? They will certainly hope not.
David, thank you. All of this with Chelsea and Roman Abramovich has renewed calls of criticism towards other ownership groups, including that of Chelsea's opponents today, Newcastle. You may remember their takeover back in October when a consortium consisting of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund bought the club from Mike Ashley. The takeover came under controversy due to concerns surrounding the repressive human rights record of Saudi Arabia, including the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018 and its actions in Yemen. It's under this backdrop. The two teams will meet a little bit later today in West London. Arlo White, Lee Dixon, and Graham Lasso will have the call from Stamford Bridge. Arlo, hello.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Gentlemen, Paul provided the context behind the ownership situations at both Chelsea and at Newcastle United. It's fair to say when Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea in 2003, it changed the entire landscape of English football and European football. The same could be said in the future at Newcastle United. Graham, firstly, what is the bigger conversation that has to be had about the ownership of football clubs?
Well, this fixture exposes an uncomfortable truth, doesn't it, about the process and tests around ownership in British football. it extends way beyond football. It extends into the way and the processes of money coming into this country and businesses, oligarchs coming into this country for many years now. So it's not solely a football problem, but it is really this particular situation we're in at Chelsea now has really focused, I think, minds on what those processes are and what should have been done in the past that is now having to be done, and Premier League and the fit and proper persons tests around ownership, they're all being exposed to be pitiful in terms of how they operate. And the English game, we've all benefited from it. And Lee and I were privileged enough to play, in the beginning of the Premier League and get those sort of rewards. But at the same time, it's become so focused on the guy with the biggest wallet gets the chance to be successful. And you have to look at clubs in the whole and look at the fans, the players, the communities they represent, and try to figure out what is more important. Is it more important just to have anyone coming in and buying a football club and then exposing the football club to what Chelsea are going through now because of a lack of proper diligence and understanding of the whole picture of some of these owners, against running a club that's sustainable, fulfilling for the fans and has an identity that people can relate to? That's what we're seeing. And my word, what a fixture to see two teams that have both got incredibly questionable situations surrounding the investments.
In some respects, they're pushing it an open door when you arrive with a blank checkbook with fan bases. Chelsea had won one title. It was 1955 before Roman Abramovich arrived. Newcastle United have not been champions of England since 1927. There's a fervour amongst Newcastle fans now to be more successful. But questions, again, need to be asked in the same way they should have been asked about Chelsea. On the footballing side, Lee, put yourself back as being a player. You're in the dressing room. There have been major world events that have occurred whilst you were playing. Yeah. Do you have... the Chelsea players are not claiming to be victims in this situation, but it's clearly a challenge to be a Chelsea player at the moment. What's your reading of it?
Well, it's a unique situation. Obviously, we're going through unprecedented times, certainly with what's going on in the Ukraine, and all our thoughts go out there. And I'm sure all the players' thoughts do it, that your mind wanders to world events. The Chelsea players are in a unique situation because their club, his assets have been frozen. It's their owner that's been sanctioned. I think from a dressing room point of view, you get lots of problems going on. Players are like no other works environment where you get different types of characters, personalities, and you react to different things in different ways. So the dressing room is no different. There'll be players in there that their form will be affected by this, and it's all right saying, well, just go out and play. It's not that easy. There's all sorts going on, and I think the senior players in the dressing room are very, very important at this stage. And some of the senior players might not be able to cope with what's going on. They might be affected. Their form might be affected. So it's important that the players remind themselves of what's going on, how they're feeling, share all that feelings before the game. They've got to go out there. They're the ones that got to go out and play the 90 minutes. And I think from their point of view now, you're in a position where their owner, and it's don't bite the hand that feeds you. It's very difficult for the Chelsea players to express probably how they're feeling when Roman was here. And you might, rightly or wrongly, they're playing for Chelsea Football Club. They're getting on with the game. Now all of a sudden the owner's not there. He's not in charge. And me and Graham were talking about this the other day about how would you feel as a player now? Would you be would you be a bit more free in your expression of what's going on in the Ukraine politically or football-wise, expressing that? Would you be more vocal? Would you be more vocal going out on the pitch with, I don't know, T-shirts or whatever it is? And it's a completely different dressing room than it was a week ago. So that we're interested in what goes on in an hour's time with the football. When we get back to the football, we'll be able to see that. And it does affect players, there's no doubt about that. And also, thoughts about all the staff, the members of staff at Chelsea who are going through things, their salaries are going to be affected, all of that type of stuff. It's a mess. It really is a mess now. And we're all of a sudden, in an hour's time, we'll be going, all right, let's get on with the game of football. It's crazy times.
Yeah, we'll be arguing over a VAR decision in an hour and a half time, potentially. Graham, you had two spells at this football club. You know a lot of people behind the scenes. It always takes you about an hour to get to the gantry because you're chatting to people that you know.
That's any ground, by the way.
But that's, yes, most grounds. What have you made of the atmosphere here today?
It's subdued and people are are concerned. You know, in the end, we look at things from our own perspective. If you're worried about your paycheck at the end of the week because of what's happened, that's reasonable. That's not undermining the tragedies we're seeing every day on our television screens. That's your real life experience on a day-to-day basis. So it's absolutely fair that people that work at the club feel affected by it and are worried about it. I think it's an opportunity for the club to pull away from the connection between the owner who's sanctioned and what goes forward, and that's on a daily basis. There's an opportunity for them to stand with the people of Ukraine, be vocal about it if they feel that way, and have the freedom to do so. And that can be the start of whatever happens in the future. And as David Ornstein said, things are changing on a daily and hourly basis. But in the longer term, we have to look at how we allow certain organisations or structures by British football clubs. And we have to focus our minds on that and getting that right. And that's down to the stakeholders in the game, the governance of the game, the Premier League, the Football Association, how they sort that out. But it's also a government a process as well, where they have to set the standards of what we expect, or what they expect of investment in this country. And that has to be done as a direct result of everything that we're tragically seeing happen on a daily basis at the moment.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting today because Chelsea fans that travelled to Norwich and Burnley recently voiced their appreciation in song for Roman Abramovich. It'll be interesting to see if the same happens here at the first home game in the Premier League for 7 weeks.
From basically what we heard from David Ornstein about the business side of this, Robbie, and how uncertain it is, how complex it is right now.
Yeah.
Where has your mind gone in listening to all of this?
That we are fact-finding at the moment, and David Ornstein's a brilliant resource for us to be around the club in the UK. The headline that came to me from David when he said, this is a club in crisis. When he talked about the possibility of Chelsea Football Club going out of business, there's a reality that hits that is a fluid situation, it is an ongoing situation. And I was sitting here thinking, we're going to do teams in a moment and talk about football. And a month ago, Chelsea's biggest problem was, how can we get Romelu Lukaku scoring goals? We're now in a situation where credit cards have been suspended, sanctions have been put in place. The sale of a football club, hopefully for Chelsea's point of view, is imminent. We're now in a situation where this football club could go out of business. This great football club, a Champions League winner, the World Club winner, could go out of business. That was the thing that hit home to me, that regardless of whatever we see today, and the world will be watching this game, the eyes of the world will be on this game, Chelsea's very existence is in doubt.
Similar, like you kind of go into that thinking you're going to learn about the sale and when it might happen. And a couple minutes in, you're worried about the existence of the here and now.
I totally agree with Rob. I mean, if people, weren't sure how serious this was, the details that David Ornstein's just produced at the top of the show is a stunning kind of realisation of what's potential here. I'll add on to things like, not sure the players will get paid. I think, also I think we need to talk about it is the complexity of the sale is massively worrying, because my thought process has been over the last few days since Thursday when we first heard about it was, well, they'll find a new owner, it will transition, it might take a few weeks, but things will get back, restrictions will go, sponsorships will come back in. David's words must make us all think, wow, this is complicated. Roman Abramovich is the owner. It's been frozen, but he still is the owner. So he has a say in the sale process, as well as the government. So then, when you start thinking about a protracted situation here, with weeks and maybe months, you then start thinking about the summer and players can't re-sign. That's 3 defenders, first-team players, that could leave. David talks about there'd be no defenders there. Can't bring anybody in. And the money will run out. If accounts and stuff like that has been frozen, the licence can be adjusted, and that's what the club will be doing every single day. But I think we all realise that this club is losing a huge amount of money every single day this is going on. And with David's points about how difficult the sale could be, that rolls us back to, wow, how serious this is right now for Chelsea Football Club.
Let me tell you, Rob, just one thing that if I was a Chelsea fan, I would be hanging my hat on. they have got an outstanding front face of their football club in Thomas Tuchel. They have got a guy who stands up to every question, answers it in the right manner, is transparent and honest, and wants to stay at the football club if at all possible. Has gone on record easily. Now, these reports last night of headlines in Sunday papers of Tuchel could possibly leave in the summer, that Manchester United are interested in going. He's already said, I want to be at this football club and part of the new group and the club moving forward, which is huge, Rob, for him to say.
It's huge, but it's still not as big as the headline.
I'm talking...
I mean, even if Thomas Tuchel's not there, the club, like, we're talking about the potential of it being squeezed to a point. It might meet administration because it can't pay its bills. It doesn't matter who's managing.
The existence is the big thing. But what I'm saying is, when at a time when some managers, we've seen Antonio Conte the other week just say, we aren't winning games and I might be off. This guy is saying he wants to be part of this football club. And when you've got somebody like him who comes up every time he's asked a question, stands for the football club, has a great kind of responsibility of the situation and what's going on around the world and the ownership, but still wants to hold his football club together. And today wants to make sure his team get the 3 points on the pitch. I just think we've got an outstanding leader of men.
Agreed.
Right. And he wants to be there for now, but we also all understand, because of how well he's handled this situation, how well he's done historically and with his resume, he's a commodity. And the longer there's uncertainty out there with his club, the more he could listen to others, the more his mind could wander.
I don't know. Is it appropriate for him to even think about it or us to even talk about it?
The thing is, Rob, what I'd say this football club now is uncertainty. Uncertainty across a number of levels, whether it's ownership, whether it's players, whether it's new signings, whether it's manager, whether it's I'm going to get played, whether the staff there are going to get paid. Uncertainty at a football club is the most unwelcome thing you can have. And there's an uncertainty around Chelsea at the moment about the very existence.
We don't see Thomas Tuchel taking the bait of anybody that might say in the summer, you know, how about our football club? You know, we're doing OK because you're right. I mean, any club or most of the other clubs in the Premier League would love to have Thomas Tuchel. That's as good a job as he's done. I just think right now, wow, they just got to try and take care of it all within the club.
My final thought on this, Paul, just is that Roman Abramovich has probably been, for many Chelsea fans, the guy who's taken this club to a height that they couldn't even dream of, winning trophies and buying players and all that. He now has to do the right thing for Chelsea Football Club and allow this sale to go quickly, or else Chelsea could look a very, very different club.
He's always said he wants to act in the best interest of the football club.
Well, David Ornstein said it.
He could walk away and make this process happen much, much quicker.
We've listened to a lot, and I could pick out a number of things right now, but to kind of put a tag on what you guys have been saying, David Ornstein pointed out, and you just mentioned as well, that Roman Abramovich, his assets have been frozen and not seized, so all of this going forward right now has to go through him. He still does own the club.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern. And for even more content, head over to Peacock, where we've got live games, original series and a dedicated round-the-clock Premier League channel featuring studio shows, classic matches and much more.